Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. October has started off with very unsettled conditions across the UK, but I think things are set to change quite dramatically through the coming days. I'll begin by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The sequence here runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday the 5th. At the start, there's a nasty area of low pressure just pulling away northeastwards, but it's still bringing outbreaks of rain to parts of eastern and northeastern Britain. Dry conditions quickly return to most of the UK, but through the coming days there will be an ongoing risk of rain in the northwest, and that theme really continues as we head towards the weekend. High pressure here building across much of the country, but Atlantic disturbances brushing northwestern parts, so Scotland and Northern Ireland predominantly. Through the weekend though, there are signs of a subtle change shaping up. What we see is high pressure centering further westwards and cooler air pushing down its eastern flank. That could lead to some showery rain at times, particularly in the eastern half of Britain. There is quite a lot of uncertainty about exactly how that will play out. I'll take a look at some of the deterministic models in a moment just to compare them. But the GFS finishes with high pressure being the main feature of UK's weather, but as I say, it is centred a little bit further west, and that leads to cooler air continuing to affect eastern Britain and the chance of some showery rain at times, probably not amounting to a great deal though. Just to take a look at a few snapshot charts from that animation, or from the model run which was used to generate that animation. This is showing forecast upper air temperatures Friday the 8th of October. What we see is yellows and oranges covering much of the UK. So it's a warm upper air temperature profile for the time of the year. Jumping forwards to Tuesday the 12th, this is where the high pressure is centering further west, and consequently cooler air is moving down its eastern flank. That's shown here by the light blue shading, so the warmth is being pushed westwards. In terms of temperatures then down at the ground level, the 2 metre level, the ones which we actually experience, it's a relatively warm picture in the short term. Forecast maximums here are from the UKV model. This is the high resolution model run by the Met Office, and they're valid for 15 GMT on Friday, October the 8th. Across much of England and Wales here, values are reaching 18, 19 or 20 Celsius. Very respectable for the time of the year. It is cooler as you head northwards, but not cold by any means. One factor which could increasingly come into play at times is the possibility of fog. I'm not convinced computer models forecast the development and extent of fog particularly well. We'll see. This is for 06 GMT Friday the 8th of October, and again it's from the UKV model. What it shows is fog forming across much of England and Wales. The darker the shading, the denser the fog is expected to be. So, as I say, this is 06 GMT. The warmer daytime temperatures are really dependent upon the low cloud and fog lifting fairly quickly to allow the sun to heat things up to get those 18s, 19s, 20 Celsius. The UKV model shows that happening, but there's always, I think, some uncertainty. The fog may end up lingering in places for longer than the computer models are suggesting. Just something to keep an eye on. In terms of minimum temperatures early next week, if that cooler air pushes southwards, particularly across the east, what we see is night times dipping down into single figures, 4, 5, 6 Celsius. The possibility of ground frost there in the north, sheltered areas, but rather cool generally. Again, though, it's going to be dependent upon having clear skies rather than cloud, which would keep temperatures higher. Daytime maximums, remember they were 18, 19, 20 Celsius on Friday, but by next Tuesday, if that cooler air moves southwards, we're seeing values of 10, 11, 12 Celsius, so significantly lower, all dependent upon just what happens to that high pressure cell. Rainfall is also quite interesting. These forecast charts are showing accumulated rainfall. For one on the left is for days 0 to 5, for one on the right, days 0 to 10. The key message here is that the wettest conditions are expected to be in the northwest of the UK, particularly western Scotland, where over the 10-day period totals exceed 100 millimetres in places. There's also a fair amount of rain being shown in eastern Britain, but most of that is forecast to fall at the very start, so on Tuesday the 5th, as that area of low pressure continues to influence things before it pulls away northeastwards. Nonetheless, totals even in the east do increase somewhat between days 5 and 10, indicating that it's not a completely dry story. Perhaps some showery rain, as I mentioned, as that cooler air moves down from the north, particularly across the eastern half of Britain. So, with the GFS suggesting that high pressure will be the dominant feature of the UK's weather at the end of the first week of the forecast period, do the other deterministic models support it? Just to recap, here is the GFS on Tuesday the 12th, high pressure to our west. At the same time, it's a very similar picture from the Canadian model. There's a high pressure. The German ICON model, slightly different. High pressure to the southwest and high pressure across the whole of the UK. The European ECM model, this has high pressure down to the southwest and stretching up here towards Iceland, Greenland, cooler air moving into northeastern parts of the UK, but not that dissimilar. Finally, the UK Met Office, this has the high pressure again just centred to our west. All in all, taking those deterministic models together, as I say, there are differences, there always will be when looking a week ahead, but the broad scale picture is similar across all of them, and the message is that high pressure will indeed be the dominant feature of the UK's weather. In turn, that suggests the likelihood of dry conditions in much of the country, although possibly the risk of showers in the east and the northeast with that cooler air coming down the eastern flank of the high pressure as it becomes centred a little bit further west. All in all, though, pretty reasonable, I think. On to week 2, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, remember it's all about using the ensemble data to try and identify trends and probabilities rather than forecast specifics when looking this far ahead. So, that being said, here's a 16-day GFS plot for London and southeastern England. Across the top, it shows forecast upper air temperatures from all of the runs in the ensemble, and by the beginning of the second week, there's a big spread showing its hand. A number of runs are going above a thick black line, the 30-year average, a number below it, including the GFS operational, which is highlighted by the thick green line here. What that tells me is that it's all down to the position of the high pressure cell. If it moves a little bit further west, as the GFS operational showed, then cooler air moves down its eastern flank. If it doesn't, then we end up under a warmer air mass. And that really tells the story throughout the second week, with that big spread continuing to show. In terms of the rainfall forecasts, well, completely dry to begin with, but later on a few spikes start to appear. Those are individual runs forecasting rain at the given time. Taking all the data there together, the suggestion is that high pressure is likely to continue being dominant through the second week. Its position is open to debate. And later on, there's just a little bit of a chance that it will begin to turn more changeable or more unsettled, with a few of the runs suggesting that rain will be falling, but those are in a minority still. Because of that uncertainty with a high pressure cell, I just thought it would be worth pulling out a chart for a location further west rather than northwest. So I pulled out Cardiff, and what we can see across the top here on the upper air temperature profile is that the ensemble mean, the purple line, is above the thick black line throughout the second week. The reason is that the cluster of warmer runs here is bigger, and that's because of the position of the high pressure cell. It's less likely as we head further west across the UK that cooler air moving down from the north will have an influence. It's not out of the question. In fact, the GFS operational, the thick green line, actually does bring cooler air even this far west, as does the thick blue line, which is the control run. But, as I say, more of the individual perturbations, as they're called, within the GEFS keep the upper air temperatures higher. Rainfall across the bottom, well, completely dry to begin with, just like the London one, but moving forwards, a few spikes start to appear, again, just suggesting the chance of it turning more changeable, more unsettled later on. Going up to the northwest now to Glasgow, the upper air temperature profile, well, to start off with, most of the runs there are above the 30-year mean. Again, the warmer cluster here is bigger than it was in the southeast because of the position of the high pressure cell, although once more the GFS does bring in cooler air here as well. Going forwards, the big split continues, again, all down to the high pressure positioning. But in terms of rainfall, there is something of a difference here. It's dry to begin with, but later on, the number of rain spikes increases more significantly than it did on the London and the Cardiff plots, suggesting that if there is going to be a transition back to more unsettled weather, it's likely to be coming in from the west, the northwest, as the Atlantic begins to erode the high pressure cell. But that's all very, very tenuous. Temperatures at the 2 metre level, the ones we experience, again, rather than using the ensemble line graphs to illustrate this, I thought I would bring up a couple of individual perturbations from the ensemble because it's all really down, as I keep saying, to that high pressure position. So the chart on the left here shows forecast maximums on Friday, the 15th of October. You can see values of 17, 18, 19 Celsius across much of England and Wales. Even in eastern Scotland there, it's quite warm as well for the time of the year. So relatively high temperatures across the UK on that one. The chart on the right is from a different perturbation within the GEFS, and the maximum forecast values are significantly lower. They're again at the same time, but now values in the north are 8 or 9 Celsius, and in the southeast of England only about 13, so a good 5 or 6 degrees lower. Therefore, quite a big 2 metre temperature spread, and in large part I think that's due to the exact position of the high pressure cell. Now, taking a look at the rainfall outlook in a little bit more detail using the data tables. This one is for London, it goes out to 16 days. What it shows is a predominantly dry scenario being favoured throughout the second week. In each of these columns, the light grey is used to show runs that are going for completely dry conditions at a given time step. And although the amount of it decreases a little bit through the second week, it remains the dominant colour. There are a few runs which bring back rain, particularly later on, but all in all, it's looking quite settled if this is correct. Jumping up to Glasgow to see the view in the northwest. At the beginning of week 2, it's the same story, light grey being dominant, but the amount of it decreases more significantly than was the case on the London plot. In turn, that means there are more runs bringing back rain later on. So, looking at the 16-day mean surface level pressure plot for Nottingham to try and get some more guidance on what could be happening, what we see is that a lot of the runs are keeping high pressure in place through the second week. There is a slight downwards trend there in the ensemble mean, the purple line, but in large part I think that's been driven by the runs which are dipping quite sharply. So a minority of runs are bringing in active low pressure systems, presumably from the west, but the majority are keeping pressure relatively high. So all in all, taking the rain data tables and this 16-day mean surface level pressure plot together, it's suggesting that settled conditions are quite likely to continue, and that's reinforced by the mean surface level pressure ensemble mean plots from the GEFS here. This one for Friday, the 15th of October. You can see the 1,025 millibar line across southern England, 1,020 cutting through Scotland there, and just to the north of Northern Ireland. Therefore, it's suggesting that high pressure is likely to continue being dominant at this point. The ECM, the European equivalent, backs it up. This goes for something of a more amplified pattern, but nonetheless, as far as the UK is concerned, it's a high pressure dominated scenario, again suggesting a good deal of settled weather. Now, we are of course reaching the time of year when people speculate more and more about the prospects for the coming winter. And personally, one of the things that I like to do through the autumn months is keep an eye on developments to our north and east. Therefore, today I thought I would finish just by showing a few ensemble plots from various locations. First up is Oslo in Norway, and across the top are upper air temperatures, so these charts from the same format as the ones that I used earlier. What we see is that for much of a 16-day period, most of the runs in the ensemble are above that 30-year average. They do dip a little bit at times, but generally it's a relatively mild outlook. Jumping up to Reykjavik in Iceland to see what's going on to the northwest. Once more, upper air temperatures often above the 30-year average there, significantly so at times. Finally, taking a look at Moscow, and this one is a little bit different, starting off with most runs there being a little below the 30-year average, but then for much of a 16-day period, they remain close to it, perhaps trending a little below at times. And towards the end there, what we see is that a number of the runs are forecasting snow. The maximum, the snow row here runs across the bottom, and it shows the number of runs in the GEFS, which is forecasting snow at the given time. It reaches a maximum there of 7 on the 18th or the 19th of October, so 7 out of 33, not particularly high. All in all, though, it's a pretty average picture being shown on the Moscow plot for the time of the year, unlike the Reykjavik and Oslo ones, which were generally quite mild. So, as I say, I think it's just worth keeping an eye on these sorts of developments through the coming days and weeks, because if we're going to get cold weather, it's either likely to be coming from the north or the east, of course. Right, to summarise the 14-day outlook, week 1. Rain clears to leave settled weather in much of the UK, but it remains more mixed and wetter in the northwest. Temperatures climb and it could become quite warm for the time of the year, although in places fog could be slow to lift, and if that happens it stays cooler. Later on, patchy rain and cooler air may move southwards, particularly across the eastern half of Britain. Week 2. Dry weather dominates, especially early on. Temperatures should often be close to or slightly above the average, although early in the period it may be cooler in the east. Towards the end of the week, the risk of rain begins to increase in the northwest, but even so, it looks like there will still be a good deal of dry weather to be found. So, that's the summary. Certainly looks like it's going to be drier for much of the next week or two, and potentially warmer as well. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful and enjoyed it. If you did, then please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thanks for watching now. Bye.